In today's episode, Priscilla and Jeff are talking with us about the search process and the various steps within it. This is the Sustainable Ministry Show, episode number 21. Who is that we? All right. Y'all ready then?
Ready.
Priscilla?
I'm ready.
All right, welcome back, folks. We are here again one more time with Jeff Dunn-Rankin and Priscilla Barnes, and we're going to spend a little more time talking about the staff transition and more specifically a search process if your church is in a staff transition. But before we do that real quick, Priscilla, will you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're at.
All right, I'm Priscilla Barnes, and I live in Belleville, Illinois. Most people know it as the St. Louis Metro East area. I am a director of operations for Virtual Ministry Assistance, which is the division of ministry architects, where we offer administrative services for churches and ministries. My husband and I also just planted a ministry called Ecclesia in the Belleville area, Illinois area. And so and I also homeschool 4 children. So that's me.
And just know, if you feel stuck administratively, Priscilla is the person to talk to. She's got a lot of good ideas, a lot of good resources, and if you could use some administrative work, don't hesitate to reach out. It may seem crazy to hire somebody to do admin stuff off-site for you, but it is extremely helpful and works. So keep that in mind. We don't do sales pitch too often, but I think that's a good one.
Thanks, Bryant.
Jeff?
I am Jeff Dunn-Rankin, and I'm the family ministry director at my home church in Venice, Florida. And by home church, I don't mean the church in my house. I just mean it's the church that is my home. It's Christ United Methodist Church. And I'm also vice president of consulting for ministry architects. Been doing that for about 10 years or so, working with Mark and this amazing team.
Fantastic. And I am Bryant Johnson, the Director of Youth Ministries at Harrison United Methodist Church, and also a consultant on our team, and get the opportunity to do this and host these discussions on a regular basis as well. And as we were talking about staff transitions last week, it seemed like a natural place to go into the search process. We know a lot of churches feel stuck in that. Sometimes it's rushed, sometimes it's hurried, sometimes they're not sure what that process looks like to start with. So where should we begin that discussion? If a church knows there's a staff transition coming up, regardless of the ministry area, what's kind of the first step in that process?
Well, I think what most churches do is go straight to prayer, and that is exactly the right thing to do.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If we're not surrounding this process in prayer, we're making a mistake. I think the second step is to not leave it at that. I think another mistake some churches do is just pin it on God, say God's going to do what God's going to do. And in our experience, what God does is ask us to engage ourselves in the process. And so people who partner with God in the process tend to have people who are a better fit, who are going to last longer than those who just hope and wish and pray.
Absolutely. I agree with what you're saying, Jeff, that prayer is foundation and that we need to partner with God. That's why He created us, so that we can partner with Him to do His work. And so when we connect with Him, we know what He wants and we can walk it out because we are His hands and feet.
Well,
it seems like a good place too to ask for patience. If there's some anxiety in the process, right? Some anxiousness that either families or church members or even other staff are feeling. If there is some anxiety around that, let's begin by seeking patience in the process and know that it can take some time, right?
It does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our experience, Bryant, is that a well-run search takes an average of 6 months, and most people don't want to hear that. And so one of the first keys, and it goes back to some of what we did in another video about how to prepare for the transition, how the church prepares for the transition. But the church needs to prepare itself for something that's going to take more than 4 weeks. Now, sometimes, God likes you best and sends you somebody right away. But typically, it's about a 6-month process. And so we need to set ourselves up and let parents and students know that we're going into this process with patience and that we are not going to settle as we head into this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Resist the urge to hire someone quickly. Go through that process, walk out that patience. And like you said, engage the parents, engage your volunteers, communicate with them well, let them know we're going to walk this process out because we want to find the best fit for that position. And so that's very, very important.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not always easy to do. And we know that. And so that's why it's so important to communicate what's going on in the transition and what that looks like. You don't need to communicate the 20 different applicants that you've got, but just the steps that are being taken. So here we are, stage 1. Here we are, stage 2. We do anticipate 6 months. And Jeff, like you said, right, it doesn't mean it can't go quicker. But if we're faithful to the process, we know in that time that we will discern who the right fit is, and also give that person to discern that this is the right fit for them as well.
And as long as you have an interim team who is making sure that that kids have a place to go, that they're safe, that learning is happening, that growing is happening, folks are going to be patient. And if you communicate as you go along, we're right on schedule, here's where we are. We're right on schedule, and here's where we are. People are willing to wait.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you have anxiety about it, then they're going to sense that anxiety, and then that's how they're going to flow. So at the same time, that's the ministry has to be patient, and if you're walking in that, then they'll follow along.
And I think both of those things are contagious.
Yes.
The anxiety is certainly contagious, right? But also to be able to say, and Jeff, you've got the language, so hopefully people will adopt that, to be able to say, hey folks, we're right on schedule. This is exactly where we expected to be. Even if behind the scenes you didn't expect to be there, this is exactly where we expected to be. Because you're helping to create the climate that will be patient in the process. So if you're on that search team, 2 months, we expected to have 10 applications turned in. Yeah. Exactly
so speaking of being patient and working the system, it's really important that you have a system. And you can get on the Google and Google systems for interviewing, systems for job searches, and you can find 100 different ones. We've written one. Ministry Architects wrote one, Mark DeVries and I together, and it's a great cookbook for putting together church searches. It's specifically focused at youth ministry, but it could be for anybody. But you don't have to buy our book to have a system, but you do have to have a system in order to carry that non-anxious presence with you into the church when you say we're right on schedule. You've got to have a system, and you got to work the system. Because if you go 6 months with just saying, it's going to be fine, I promise, it might not be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are a few of those pieces of the system?
Well, I would say one of the first steps is to get clarity about who we're looking for. This is a great opportunity for the church to step back and ask itself what was working with the last person we put in place and what didn't work. And being careful, of course, not to throw a whole new pendulum swing in a drastically new direction, to say this person wasn't organized, so we're going to get an accountant to come in and do our job now. The church can back itself out and ask itself a couple of key questions, because most youth directors are human beings. Almost every youth director I've met is a human being. And the human beings have limitations, and they're only going to be able to do a few things well, and then a few things okay, and then some things lousy. And you've got to get really clear on which things you're willing to have a person do lousy and which things they must do well. So there's a process. If somebody wants to send me an email to the email address I got on the screen, I'll send you a list of questions you should be asking yourself. It's just the appendix in the book. It's easy for me to copy and send to you. a list of questions you should be asking yourself so you can focus on what you're really looking for and then write a job description that matches what you really need. That's the first step, is to have crystal clarity about the kind of person you're looking for.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Clarity is so important because ultimately you're setting expectations. When you've got that clarity and you've got the expectations of what needs to be done with excellence in the position, you also set up, and I know this is further in the process, this is after the hire is done, but you set up a real good opportunity for evaluations throughout the year. To be able to be done on a regular basis. So many churches will hire and then forget the evaluation sometimes. And that certainly is important. And if it's done right on the front end, it can be done right as you continue to work with your staff year round. That's certainly helpful as well.
Oh, you know what, Bryant? I left out the real first step because Priscilla was talking about it earlier. Before we can get together and talk about what we're looking for, we got to create a we, right? Priscilla?
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Who is that we?
So that we is that we have to put a team together that leaders in the church, youth leaders, or whatever leaders in the church that will come together and say, this is what we're looking for this particular position. And this is what will work for our context of ministry. And once you have that in place, and that way you don't just have one person saying, this is what I want, that you have multiple people that are speaking into the life of the church and the life of this position, so that as we move forward, we are opening up for the opportunity for the ministry not to only continue to continue, but we want it to grow. And so I think that's key, is that we have, because there are people that have great ideas that we wouldn't think about. And so we want to make sure we include them in this process so that we're working together as a team. And I think that's so very, very important.
And there's a lot of work, right, in doing a search well. And it's not a one-person job. It's a multi-person job. Each person on the team has their role. Somebody's collecting and compiling the resumes. Somebody's making sure they get posted. Somebody else is leading the team meetings. Somebody else is communicating with the congregation. Somebody else is making sure that we've worked our web of resources. So there's a lot of work to be done. It will not be done well by one person. It has to be done by a team that's in it to win it until the very end. So
absolutely,
that's a huge piece of it. And Bryant, I'll just go one more step and say that what a lot of people do is they say, we got to get this thing posted at all the right job posting sites. The most common question people ask us is, where's the best place to post my job? And here's the answer. There is no best place to post your job. Posting a job on the internet or in your local paper or in a denominational magazine is just as effective as asking for volunteers in the bulletin, meaning hardly at all.
Yeah.
You never know, you might get lucky and somebody will see it in the bulletin and they'll be just the right person to volunteer. And you never know, you might get lucky and somebody who's been out of work for 6 months and is looking at the job boards will be just the right person. But typically, the person is found by a person.
Yes.
The person is found by a person and is often the most unlikely person in your church. The first church I ever worked with on a job search was in St. Louis, and they very wisely asked everybody in the congregation to just send a note to 2 or 3 people. And they pre-wrote the email and said, this is the email we want you to send to your friends. It can be anybody who might know a person in their 20s or 30s who is an Episcopalian who loves young people. Send it out. And our assumption is that 9 out of 10 of the emails you send will be useless, but send them anyway. So they did that. And some lady who sat in the second row of the church with blue hair, who did this just because she was committed to her church, emailed some old friends up in Michigan. The friends up in Michigan said, that's funny. A woman I play bridge with has a nephew who's just graduating from college with a degree in youth ministry. Y'all might want to talk to him. Yeah. Well, that kind of story gets repeated over and over and over again when we listen to people and how they found their jobs. The more nets you throw out, the more fish you can catch in hopes that you find the right one. You throw 1 or 2 nets, you get 10 or 20 fish. You throw 200 nets, you get 500 fish. And the more people you get to look at, the more likely it is you're going to find the one who's designed just right for your church.
Yeah, and whether it's through that email or even a social media posting that the search team has drafted or the church has drafted for people just to copy and paste. I mean, it's that simple, and folks will do that and share. Certainly, they know people who are looking and want to use that resource. I always think of this as like the church is wooing these people, right? Like they're wooing their next staff person there.
Right.
And that's an intentional process. Like that doesn't just happen haphazardly, right? So
it's kind of like sorority rush. We're wooing and we're filtering at the same time.
Right.
We're checking them out and they're checking us out. I can't tell you how many youth pastors have said to me, I went to that church because I felt like I belonged there. I just felt at home there. And the fact is, there are more churches looking for a youth pastor or a children's director or a music leader than there are great worship leaders, great youth pastors, or great children's directors for your church. So you're in competition. We think they're in, that their job is impress us, but our job is to impress them too, or they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I like that the way that we're communicating is that it's relationship. And relationship is so very, very important. And even the person who is transitioning from that could know someone that knows someone that would fit well for that position. And so that's why relationship is so very important, because you don't know what blessing will come from the relationships that you have already in your congregation and even in those that have transitioned. So another thing I believe that it's important to maintain those friendships and those relationships that you have, even in the midst of transition or even after transition has happened.
Absolutely. And assuming that this video was watched by a search team somewhere or the chairman of a search team, let me just tell you, you probably feel unqualified to do the job that you're doing right now. The church asked you to do this thing, and you're worried to death that you're going to get the wrong person and the church will hate you. Or it'll all fall apart on your watch. It doesn't take long to become good at this. If you will dedicate about 2 or 3 hours to researching how to do a search, get on the internet, get the book, ask friends who have done it before, you will develop a system that's really quite good. If you develop a system at all, you're ahead of 80% of the churches in America. And you'll put a good foot forward if you're the one who's doing it professionally. And it doesn't take that long to get pretty good at this, because our instincts are decent. You were put on the committee because someone trusted your instincts and someone trusted your work ethic. So all you need are a couple of checklists on how to pull it off. And they are out there all over the place. So you avail yourself to the resources, you can become good at this as long as you work it.
Well, like a lot of discussions we have, I think we've discussed enough that maybe leaves people with more questions than answers. We know the search process is not easy. We know that it can be taxing sometimes on teams, but there is a better way. There is a better way than just rushing in, and there is a better way than entering that into that process with anxiety. So if you have further questions, please follow up with us. How can people get in touch? Jeff, how can people get in touch with you if they've got more questions about the process?
Well, Bryant, they can knock on my door at 3308 Meadow Run Circle, Venice, Florida, long as they do it before 10 o'clock at night. They can look me up on Facebook and message me. They can send an email to the email that's on the screen right now. So would love to field questions about this. It makes us so happy to help somebody get from where they are to where they want to be.
Could you 1, 2, 3 those for us? Like, which would be your preference in order?
Oh, absolutely. Knock on my door with a basket of fruit would be my number one preference.
There you go.
After that, would be knock on my door with some macadamia nut white chocolate cookies, and 3 would be email.
Perfect. Priscilla?
You can contact me at Priscilla@ministryarchitects.com. I am also on Facebook as Priscilla Jenkins Barnes. And so those are the ways that you can contact me.
And you can probably find her address if you are really good at Google.
You probably could.
And I am Bryant Johnson. Feel free to email me at bryant@ministryarchitects.com. Look me up on Facebook at facebook.com/Bryant Johnson. While you're there, look up Ministry Architects, like Ministry Architects on Facebook or on Twitter at MIN Architects. And then, as always, don't forget to subscribe, whether you watch on YouTube or listen through iTunes or one of the other podcatchers, even Stitcher Radio we're on now as well. So feel free to subscribe in those places and then share this with your friends. Thanks so much, Priscilla, Jeff, for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Ha 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 ha.